In August 1945, the sun seemed to drop directly onto the Earth. In a fraction of a second, the atomic age began, bringing a sudden, violent end to a conflict that had already claimed the lives of roughly 60 to 80 million people. The skies cleared to reveal flattened cities and completely erased civilian landscapes across Japan. But it forces a difficult question. The First World War was supposed to be the war to end all wars. So how did humanity plunge itself into an even deadlier global conflict barely 2 decades later? The answer starts at the negotiating table. The Treaty of Versailles, signed in 1919, was technically a peace agreement, but in practice, the victorious Allied powers used it as a tool for severe punishment. Looking at this map of post-war Germany, you can see the immediate cost. The treaty stripped Germany of vital industrial territories, including 26% of its coal output.
On top of that, the Allies handed the new German government a staggering bill for the war's damages, amounting to £6.6 billion. Paying that debt was difficult enough, but when Wall Street crashed in 1929, American financial support vanished. German industrial production collapsed by 40%, and the government's desperate decision to just print more money triggered massive hyperinflation. By 1923, the German financial system had reached a point of total disintegration. Currency lost value so rapidly that wheelbarrows were required to buy a single loaf of bread, and bundles of cash literally became playthings for children on the street. The Treaty of Versailles didn't resolve the geopolitical tensions of the First World War. It simply stripped a defeated nation of its resources, its savings, and its dignity, leaving a dangerous economic vacuum waiting to be filled. The newly formed League of Nations was supposed to step in and mediate these kinds of crises. But the League had no military force of its own, and major powers largely ignored its directives. It was entirely toothless. Down on the streets, the human desperation was compounding. By 1932, roughly 6 million Germans were unemployed. People were starving, disease was spreading, and faith in the struggling Weimar Republic evaporated. This was the exact environment Adolf Hitler needed. He capitalized on the misery, delivering highly charismatic speeches that offered convenient scapegoats. He promised to tear up the Treaty of Versailles, rebuild the economy, and restore German pride. The public listened. Once elected chancellor, Hitler quickly secured absolute dictatorial power. He pulled Germany out of the League of Nations and began pouring money directly into the military, rapidly building a heavily armed, deeply indoctrinated fascist state. You had millions of furious, economically ruined citizens on one side, and an international community completely unable to enforce the peace on the other. A secondary explosion of violence was practically guaranteed. That explosion arrived on September 1, 1939. German forces executed a false flag operation, dressing their own men in Polish uniforms to stage a fake attack on a German radio station. Using this as a flimsy excuse, Hitler invaded Poland. This was total war, a conflict where the battlefield extended into every city street and apartment block. Armed forces now prioritized the destruction of civilian homes, hospitals, and industrial centers to cripple the enemy's ability to survive.
Germany didn't repeat the slow trench warfare of the past. They used blitzkrieg, lightning war. They bypassed direct routes, punching through Belgium with overwhelming armored speed, and forced France to surrender in a matter of weeks. When the United Kingdom refused to negotiate, the violence moved into the sky. During the Battle of Britain, German bombers relentlessly pounded British cities night after night, attempting to break the morale of the everyday civilian. By erasing the boundary between the soldier on the front line and the civilian in their bed, the combatants ensured that total devastation would blanket the entire European continent. In 1941, Hitler made a fatal strategic error. He broke his non-aggression pact with the Soviet Union and invaded the East. His forces quickly bogged down, decimated by a freezing Russian winter they were never equipped to handle. Meanwhile, the conflict spilled across the Pacific. Japan launched a surprise strike on the American naval base at Pearl Harbor. In a single morning, they pulled the immense industrial and military might of the United States directly into the war. But the superpowers didn't fight this alone. They heavily leveraged their overseas empires. India, for example, provided 2.5 million soldiers to fight for the Allied cause. The domestic cost for these colonies was staggering. British authorities aggressively diverted local grain, cotton, and wealth out of local markets, shipping it all away to supply the European front lines. This massive export of essential food supplies, combined with wartime inflation, left the poorest citizens with nothing. The resulting Bengal famine of 1943 was a manufactured catastrophe, starving roughly 3 million civilians to death. A war that started over a European border dispute ultimately drained and starved the global South, proving just how deeply entangled the global economy had become. By 1945, the Axis powers were completely crushed, pushed back by American and British forces from the West, and overrun by a vengeful Soviet army from the East. Hitler retreated to his Berlin bunker and took his own life. Japan continued to fight for a few more months, up until the United States deployed its nuclear weapons. The total destruction of Hiroshima and Nagasaki forced a surrender and permanently raised the stakes of global warfare. Look at this map of Europe after the dust settled, and you can see the first major shift of the post-war world. The victorious powers carved Germany in half. The US and its allies controlled the West, the Soviets controlled the East, and the lines for a bipolar Cold War were instantly drawn. The second major shift happened outside Europe. The war totally bankrupted traditional empires. Britain and France simply didn't have the military or economic strength left to suppress the massive waves of independence movements pushing for freedom across India, Africa, and Asia. Finally, the failed League of Nations was thrown out completely. In its place, the global powers established the United Nations, an organization built with an actual framework and authority to mandate international cooperation. World War II dismantled the old imperial system. In its place, it left a highly polarized, fragile new reality, a world forced to maintain peace because the cost of another war meant total nuclear annihilation.